So how did everyone do with the GitHub homework from last night? Do we want to let's maybe spend a little bit of time reviewing and talking about the assignment? Who had problems or who had issues that they'd like to talk about? Go ahead, Olivia. Yeah, you can take it away.
An issue I had is I was trying to clone it on a different computer and I kept getting like permission issues.
Yep, and that issue
No
is
sound set.
what's that, Rakesh? Okay. So Olivia, that issue is the same.
No sound.
What? Okay. That issue is what we were talking about when we were using that SSH keygen program yesterday. And I said you don't have to do this very often, but the example of when you have to do this is when you get a new computer or you get. So every time that you make a computer or you get a computer or you want to use GitHub from a different computer, you're going to have to generate an SSH key and tell GitHub that that SSH key is allowed to use it.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought, but I'll figure that out or play with it some more later today on the other computer.
Yeah. So that same process where you run SSH keygen and you pass in, that variable, and I think they give you a link to it if I pull up GitHub here. The instructions of how to do it are always under settings, and then if you go to SSH and GPG keys, right, it says check out our guide to generating SSH keys. You can click this link, and it will tell you how to do it. Generate a new SSH key. So it's going to give you. You just literally have to run this command. Right? Let's see if I can make it bigger for you. If you run this command in your console, it's going to generate a key that you can then copy into this page, right? You can have multiple SSH keys in here. So you can have like computer 2, right? And you paste in your key. That's not a key, but you can have multiple in here. So that's, just get comfortable doing it. Like, I don't memorize what that command is. I always just go here and look because you don't do it often enough.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Who else? Any other issues or things that were a challenge? No? Everybody's good at Git now? Cool. Yeah, so yesterday we learned the Git program itself has a whole bunch of subcommands, right? We learned about clone, status. Status is the one that I think you should just get your fingers used to typing that over and over and over again because it's the safest command to make sure that like you know what you're doing and that everything that you're working on is available to work. Right? Let's see if we can find a CBC13 CD new project. Right. So whenever I'm opening my work for the day, I'm almost always going to do a git status. And if I'm working on a big team, I'm probably going to run git fetch as well, just to see, have there been any changes that I need to pull down? And if there are no changes, right, it's not going to say anything. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's get started. We're going to kind of talk at a high level for a few minutes, and then we're actually going to go and install Visual Studio Code. So up until now, we've been kind of playing in the console with a text editor that lets us read and write files, right? So when we're in here, we could use Nano to edit this code, this file, and make changes to it, right? At its core, all of these source code editors are just text editors, right? Back in the olden days, when if I wanted to write some code, I can come here and say, function hello, right? Alert, hi, right? This is code, right? And so if I save this and I say yes, let's save it as test.js. Yes. All right, so now I have a file in here, head test.js, that is source code, right? I don't need anything special to write code. If I'm on Windows here, I can open up Notepad. Let's see if we can find our file here real quickly. I should make a shortcut to CBC13 now. Is this a new project? Because I had opening just text documents, right? So I open up this code, right? Like this is a text editor, Nano is a text editor. In the early days, when I was learning software development in the 90s, I used Notepad as my main editor for writing software, and that is a painful experience. Specifically because Notepad, just like Nano, does not give us any line numbers. It doesn't tell us if we're making mistakes. Good software engineering code editors and development environments, they give us all of these nice features that make it more pleasant to work. And we're going to pick one and use it. Okay, so the one we're going to pick is called Visual Studio Code. It is a lightweight version of a bigger program called Visual Studio. Visual Studio is Microsoft's expensive development environment, right? So it's like $1,500 for a license, but it comes with compilers and all kinds of stuff that make you an effective software engineer. About 10 years ago, maybe 6, they had this idea that said, hey, we want more people to use Microsoft's tools, so we're going to make a lightweight free version of Visual Studio and make it open and make it so that as many people as possible can become software engineers without needing to use all this expensive stuff. And so they created a product called Visual Studio Code. It's very similar to Visual Studio, though it lacks some of the power user features that, if you're working in a big company that uses Visual Studio, you're able to compile your programs and then use Visual Studio to like step through each line of code to make sure that nothing is broken when it's compiled, right? But Visual Studio Code is great because it is open. It has all of this functionality that has been built in by the community as open source to let us make that environment work for us in whatever project or program we're working in, right? So we're going to install a bunch of plugins today in Visual Studio that make us more efficient at the Node and HTML and CSS that we're going to be writing in this class, okay? So, yeah, that's a pretty good stopping point. Let's all open up a browser window and download Visual Studio Code. So we can just go Visual Studio Code, go to Google, and it's going to be the top link, code.visualstudio.com. If you already have Visual Studio Code installed on your computer, no worries. Just open it up because we're going to start using it next and exploring some of the plugins, okay? So, you should be at a page that looks like this. It's going to say download for Windows, or if you're on a Mac, it's going to probably say download for Mac. Click that button, unless you already have it. So I'm going to click the button. It's going to automatically start the download, and you can see that when it's done, it's going to say there's a few seconds left. But once that's done, once everyone is here, let me know. I have to close Visual Studio Code so I can run this stupid program. Downloads Visual Studio Code. Good. All right, so you should have a window that kind of looks like this. It's the agreement where you're saying, yes, I want to install this software. So you're going to click I agree. Does everyone at this stage, or am I going too fast? Good. Okay. So you accept the agreement. You can choose to create a desktop icon if you want, but all these other options, add open with code, like all those, leave those checked. Those are good. Those are good for us. And then click next again, and then when you get to this final screen, click install, and it should start installing your program. Okay. And when that's done, you should open up. Let's see if I can pull up a new window. You should see something that kind of looks like this, right? Visual Studio Code. Is everyone at this stage where you got Visual Studio open? Two minutes? All right, we'll give you a second. How's everybody's Wednesday going? Pretty good?
I have ice cream in my coffee.
Oh, that sounds amazing. All right, well, while he's installing, I need a drink. I did not prepare and get myself a drink. I'll be right back. How is it going? What kind of ice cream, Selena?
Frosty.
Delicious.
Vanilla Frosty.
From Wendy's?
Yep.
It's pretty brilliant.
We didn't have any milk, so I was like, get me a Frosty, and I can put it in there.
Great. Okay, so now that we're all caught up, right? So this is Visual Studio. At its core, this is just a text editor, just like Notepad or Nano or any other editor that we're going to use, because all of source code, all of the code that we're going to write is just text. But what Visual Studio Code gives us is it understands languages and it understands syntax. And it's got a whole bunch of tools built in that makes our jobs a little bit easier as software engineers. So you remember I was writing that code. Let's see if I can open that file that we were working on. CBC13, new project. Yeah, test. Right. So you see, first and foremost, it's giving us, I'll make this a little bit bigger if I can. It's giving us line numbers down the end. That is extremely important as a software engineer. So when we start to work together collaboratively, or when I'm helping you with some of your homework, I'll say, your problem is on line 2, you forgot a semicolon, right? So it lets us describe where we are with points of reference, okay? It's also giving us syntax highlighting, right? So you can see that you got nice pretty colors here. It's going to be blue for the name of the function. The function name itself is yellow. So both alert and hello are yellow because they're both functions. The strings here are kind of highlighted in this like reddish color, and then it highlights our curly brackets. And we're gonna cover in more detail what all of these things actually are and what the names of these different things are as we get into this later on, kind of week 3 or week 4. But all of this code is easier for us to work with because Visual Studio Code has given us a better environment to do that. This type of thing is usually called an integrated development environment, and sometimes you'll hear it be referred to as an IDE or a code editor, right? They're all synonyms that mean, some editor that was designed specifically for software engineers to write code in, okay? You'll also notice that, unlike with Notepad or, when we're in Nano, by default, it's giving us tabs, just like we would get in a browser, right? So these tabs are going to let us have multiple bits of source code open at the same time, right? So I can make a new file and we'll say function other alert, right? Alert no, right? And as soon as I save this as something .js, right? Now it knows this is JavaScript, and I can have both of these up at the same time. And I can also, if I'm trying to refer to documentation, or I'm trying to look at what a function is called in a different screen, I can pull these tabs into being side by side. Right? I can just drag these to be wherever I want. And I can also move them up and down if I want to look at it like this. Right? So this type of functionality is extremely powerful. And I can even split it multiple ways. Right? So this is a tab. Right? Good. So I can have this sliced and diced in whatever type of way that makes me more efficient to write code. This is an extremely powerful tool that you're not going to get if you were to spend all day writing your code in Nano, right? Test.js, right? Although we do get a little bit of syntax highlighting in here, so that's pretty cool too. Okay, so that's the main thing. What other things do we need to care about in here, right? So this is our Project Explorer. So when we start working on projects, most of the time you're going to open the entire folder, right? So let's do that now. We've got all these projects open. New project. I'm just going to click select folder, right? So it's going to select the folder that I have up here in my path. So I'm going to select that folder, and you'll see, let's save that. Right, great. It's opened, I trust all that. It's opened all of those files that are in that folder over here in a panel so that I can click on this and have it open up in here, right? So you can see how when I'm working in a big project with a whole bunch of folders and subfiles and things like that, this kind of panel view, this tab that this panel that shows us all of our source code is extremely useful for helping us navigate around inside of our program. Now, it also has a whole bunch of other power features that I hope you'll begin to learn over time. I'm going to share some keyboard shortcuts with you tonight. It's not necessary that you memorize them, but when we're talking about the efficiency and we're talking about typing speed over the last couple of days, this is some of the stuff that you'll start to get the hang of that will make you a better software engineer. So an example, look at this test.js file, for example. I have it open right here. There's a keyboard shortcut, Control-P, that lets me type in a file name and have it open automatically. So if there was hundreds and hundreds of files in this project, I can quickly, through keyboard shortcuts, open those up, right? And you'll start to learn some of those keyboard shortcuts, hopefully, the more and more you use this. One of the things that I've always felt very strongly about as a software engineer, and that I've always tried to train junior engineers to follow, is that if there's any amount of time that you have extra, the best use of your time that you can possibly spend is learning the shortcuts and the power features behind the tools you use on a daily basis. So if you're going to be a professional engineer and you're going to work in your day job 8 hours a day, spend 3 hours learning everything there is to know about your text editor, and you'll be more efficient tomorrow than any of your coworkers. People that do not spend the time to learn all the ins and outs of their tools, I really think you're doing yourself a disservice, because those productivity gains multiply on a daily basis. It's like a compounding interest type of idea, right? So the more efficient you are quicker at using your tool and navigating around, the better you're going to be as a developer, and the easier it will be for you to do better work than your peers, right? And that'll help you earn promotions and work on better projects, and then hopefully eventually get better jobs. Right? Cool. Just like with most of the programs, so this is going to be slightly different on Mac. You Mac people, all of your menu options are going to be in the top level Mac menu bar when you have the program open. But your usual suspects are in here. The file menu is how you open files, open folders, create new files, those sorts of things. The edit menu is going to give you all of your find and replace. One that I use most often is find in files, right? So if I'm looking for a line of code, or I'm looking to see what files are using a specific function, I'll use this all the time, and I'll say, where is the hello function used, right? And so it'll tell me, imagine if you're working on a big project, this is going to show up all of the places that stuff is in use. And just to give you like a concrete example, this is what my Visual Studio looks like for my day job, right? This is my project at work, right? We've got hundreds of files in here, tons of folders. Like, this is the level of complexity that you're going to see in most of your products when you're working in the real world, right? And so being able to navigate very quickly and open up, user.php, for example, right? And it's kind of hard because I have everything zoomed in real big so you guys can see it on the video. This is like the common size of a project like this when you're working on real things. So that's the edit menu. The selection menu, some of this is pretty useful, but it lets you do some power features. Like if I wanted to edit multiple lines of code, I can Alt-click, I believe. Yeah, and I'm creating, if you'll notice this little blinking, I'm not sure if it shows up in the video feed, but I've got 3 cursors now. So if I wanted to write a bunch of lines of code, or I wanted to edit a couple of lines at the same time, right, I can create cursors in multiple places by holding down my Alt key and creating them, and now I'm editing in line, right? So sometimes that's useful as a software developer, and it just makes you more efficient, right? The selection menu gives you some of those keyboard shortcuts. We were talking about the power features, right? If you wanted to do this with the add a cursor above Control, Alt, and up arrow, right? So if I hold Control, Alt, and up arrow, now I've got 4 cursors here. Right? That's the selection menu. The view menu, this is where you're going to get some of those crazy, some of the crazy power features, and we're going to use this later on today when we start installing some of our plugins. But there's a command palette here, so you can do everything you can do by clicking around in a menu. You can do in this command palette. So you'd be like install extension, right? So you can navigate to that install extensions functionality just by typing in that command, right? What else can you do? Run. When you start working in other programming languages, if you ever branch out aside from JavaScript, we are able to compile. You are able to run your scripts, and Visual Studio Code will help you do that, right? We can add breakpoints and debug and step through our code using the run menu. And then this one, the terminal, this is one of the most powerful features, and it's one of the reasons why we start learning in this class about git bash, or in the Mac user's case, the Z shell, because most of the time when we're in here with Visual Studio Code, it doesn't make sense to toggle back and forth to another editor or another window like this. What we can do is they've got a built-in terminal. So if I click New Terminal down here, it's opening up. You'll notice it looks very similar to Git Bash, but it's opening up to that folder that we're already in for our project. So I have this project folder open, but now I have a terminal down at the bottom of my screen, and from here I can run all of those same commands, like git status, right? And we see now that I have 2 new files. I can do git add dot, git commit -n. Yeah, go ahead.
So, like we had last time up there where it says bash on yours,
Yep.
it won't automatically come up as bash, so that has to be changed manually.
And so the way to do that is you're going to click select default profile if you want it to be get bash by default. If you select that, it probably, for those of you on Windows, says command prompt, or those of you on Mac maybe says Z shell. You don't need to change it if it's already Z shell. But if it says command prompt, you just want to change it to be get bash. So that will be the default terminal that is opened. Because if you don't, right, Visual Studio Code, if you've got 10 different terminals installed, it'll let you open up as many as you want, right? So the default is maybe something like this, like a command prompt or PowerShell. If you want it to be bash, you can make that be the default by clicking this down arrow and clicking select default profile. Yeah. So I'm going to commit these files. So before I commit these files, the other power feature, right? So that was the terminal. The other thing that is really powerful about Visual Studio Code is that it also has a built-in understanding of version control. So it already has Git built into itself. So you can see these are those two changes that I staged. And if I pull up my terminal a little bit bigger and I type git status, right? Those are those files. Because I ran git add on them, it is showing us that those have been added. And I can subtract them back, right? So I'm going to click something.js. So now if I type git status down here, you'll see that test is still staged, something.js is not. So I can interact with GitHub, or with Git in any direction. I can do it through this interface, or I can do it from the terminal. It's important, it's very, very important that you practice both. And so we're going to do both throughout this course, just based on whatever I feel like doing at the time. Just because you have a tool like Visual Studio Code that makes it really easy to do it from in here, does not mean you should not know what is happening under the hood. Because when you start working with servers, when you start working on environment, maybe you're using a different code editor at your day job, they might not have this feature built in, and you still need to know how to do things correctly. So, but from here, you can do everything that we were doing with Git, right? So if I put a message in here and I say, adds new JavaScript code, and I click this checkbox, this is going, if you hover over it, it's really tiny to see here on the screen, but it says commit. So this is going to run git commit -m and pass in this message. So when I click this checkbox, now if I do git status, right, everything's good. Now it also has hidden under this 3-dot menu here, I can also push this to GitHub. So if I click this push button, you'll see it. Yep. Oh, I never fixed my permission issue, but that would have pushed that work to GitHub. Okay. So we can do this from both places, both the terminal or from the built-in Git Explorer. And then we have a run debug. So if we were running something like C or C++ and you're writing code that needs to be compiled, you can do all of that from here. We probably won't use this too much in our course. And then down here, this little 3 checkboxes is the extensions. So we are going to install a bunch of extensions that I think are really useful for web development. And we'll do that coming up here in a minute. Does anyone have any questions about just kind of high-level overview of what what Visual Studio Code does for us and why it's important? Is there anything you'd like to go over in more detail? No? All right. Karif, go ahead.
Quick question. The Explorer, is it drag and drop or is it just...
This one?
Yeah.
Like, in what's it? Can you like drag files into there from other places?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think so. Let's check. Good question. I've never tried to drag things. Let's see, CBC13. Let's pull something from here. Yeah, cool.
Oh, okay.
Neat. So now that file is in our project, and if we checked our version control tab over here, right, it's going to show you that there's a new file in this folder now that we're not tracking. So if we do git status down here, there you go. We just added a new file to this folder. So yeah, cool. Drag and drop. Neat. Oh, cool. It's got like an outline view and a timeline view. I don't know what any of that does. That's neat. Yeah, they're always adding new features to this. When Visual Studio Code was released a few years ago, it was a really lightweight text editor that had numbers and coloring. And they've just continued to develop new features and make this a really robust environment. So there's always new stuff to learn, and if you continue to learn with it, it will hopefully make you even more efficient. Cool. Awesome. Any other questions? Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to install a bunch of extensions. So this is going to be kind of you need to follow along as we do this, because these extensions are extremely useful for what we're going to do in this class. So what I need everyone to do is, if you're in your window, you're going to click on this little extensions option down here at the bottom of this little panel. And what we're going to do is you're going to type in these words, which is going to bring you to a page. So if I type in bracket, pair, colorizer, right, it's going to bring you, if you click on it, it's going to open it into the main window. And then there should be a button for you that says install. If you click that button, it's going to install this in here. And what the bracket pair colorizer does is it's going to make sure that your brackets are colored so that they line up. Like, this is one of those useful features. You use these brackets all over the place. We're going to use them time and time again, and it's important to be able to visually see what is the bracket that matches this bracket. So this is a really powerful plugin. Okay. Once everybody's got that installed, the next one that I want you to install is close this out. The code spell checker. Code spell checker. It should look like this, a little green icon. Install that one. Everybody caught up? Okay. Next is EJS language support. EJS is our templating language that we're going to use in like week 8 when we start using Node.js and we start building websites dynamically. EJS is a great templating language. And then we're also going to add the EJS snippets and color highlighting plugin. So add that one as well. Okay. Next, we're going to install git blame, G-I-T blame. Should look like this. Uninstall this one. Install that one. Okay. And then the next one we want to install is HTML and CSS support. So this is going to add some nice auto completion options when we start writing HTML later this week. Okay. The next one to install is Indent Rainbow. Indent Rainbow is what is giving you these nice little colors. If you remember looking over here, let's add some more tabs. Right, so it's making a different color for each level of indentation we're in. This is really helpful for you to be able to visually see, am I at the right line of code? Okay, Indent Rainbow. The next one, this one's super powerful. It's called Live Server. Live Server. It should look like this. What this does, it gives us a button down at the bottom of our page where if we click this, it's going to make a little web server that runs just on your computer so that you can view the code that you're writing, like in a browser. And every time you make a change to your code, it's going to automatically update the browser window. It's going to refresh the page. So as you're working, this lets you really quickly iterate and test what you're doing. Live Server. That's a really good one. The next one you're going to get is Lorem Ipsum. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. But Lorem Ipsum basically lets us put a bunch of like gibberish words into our code so that we can use it as placeholder text. Right? So if we make a paragraph tag and we're starting to lay out our website, we want to be able to just quickly throw in a couple paragraphs to see what it's going to look like as if when we actually add the content in. Lorem Ipsum is kind of like the industry standard for everyone knows it's gibberish, and it doesn't, it's not accidentally going to have bad words or anything in there that is going to get you in trouble. So Lorem Ipsum is like gibberish text generator. The next one we want to install is Markdown All-in-One. Markdown All-in-One. And we're going to actually, that's going to be the focus of today is writing Markdown, right? So this is going to give us a whole bunch of nice features, and we can even read all the things that it does in here if we wanted to, right? So it's going to show us a little bit of stylistic things when we start writing our Markdown. Okay. The next thing we want to install is Node.js modules IntelliSense. Right? And when we get into Node.js stuff a little bit later in the course, this one's going to be really nice. It actually opens up the modules and it reads all the functions in those modules so that it can give us some suggestions as we're writing code. Okay. And you can kind of see it in this little example GIF. And then the next one is Path IntelliSense. Right? It's going to auto-complete file names and path names for us. Right? This one's really useful. So if it knows that you got a JavaScript file that you're trying to embed in your HTML, and it's inside the scripts folder or whatever, as soon as you start typing it, it's going to bring down a list of options, right? So that you can, here's an example. Right? It's filling in these paths here. The next is Prettier. Prettier is a code formatting tool, so it's going to make it so that your source code looks a little bit nicer. This one's really a pretty useful one. And then we want to do the regex previewer, R-E-G-E-X previewer. And this plugin is going to help us. We're going to learn about regular expressions, I think week 3 or week 4. It's a pretty complicated way of dealing with searching for words inside of text. And they're kind of a crazy, kind of a crazy thing. Like you can kind of see this example here, where it's got a whole bunch of special characters in there. The regex previewer, this module specifically, will give us some examples inside of Visual Studio Code to let us know what it's matching as we're typing a regular expression. Okay, and then the last one, this one is really important to me, is VS Code icons, right? So by default, if I had this turned off, when I'm inside my little Explorer here, all I'm going to see is the names of the files. The VS Code icons extension, VS Code icons extension, it gives us this little thing that says JS, right? And if I was to make a new file called, style.css, right? It gives us a style sheet, a CSS icon. And if I make one that is HTML, right? Index.html, right? It gives us an HTML icon, right? So this helps us in our Explorer pane. It's another thing that makes it a little bit easier to work with in this environment, right? Because if I had that turned off, all that would be, I'll show this off, disable. Right? Probably have to reload, huh? There we go. Yeah. So we lose some of that. Some of those icons, right? It doesn't tell us necessarily what they are. And it looks like I probably have another plugin in here that's giving us some icons already. That's interesting. That didn't used to be there. So Visual Studio Code is always getting better. So sometimes, we rely on functionality that an extension is providing us, but we might find in 3 months or 6 months that they've added it to the core program. So interesting. And you can also set themes and stuff. So you have some options in here if you wanted to style your environment a little bit differently. Go ahead, Karif.
Yeah, I have SETI Visual Studio Code that popped up for some reason when I downloaded the VS Code icons.
Share your screen. Let's take a look.
Oh, wrong button. Did you see it here?
Yeah, so it looks like they've... okay, so SETI is apparently the default icons. That didn't used to exist, I guess, right? So it used to just be the word of the file. So it looks like they've recently, in Visual Studio, added default little icons. And so now this plugin is letting you choose what icon style you want. Okay, so you can just click VS Code icons and it'll look like mine does. Or you can pick SETI and it will look like the ones that I was showing you when I disabled it.
Okay, we'll go with that one.
Yeah, cool. There's a whole bunch of other plugins in here, and if you start working in other environments or other languages, or you're working in a different field or new technologies, you should definitely go. Your first instinct should be to go in here and search around in the marketplace and see if there's a plugin that will make it easier for you. So, like a good example, I also do robotics development with Arduino, right? And so I don't have any Arduino stuff installed in Visual Studio, but if I was going to write a bunch of Arduino code, I might come in here and just search for Arduino and just see what pops up. Yeah, so this one, this has 1 million downloads and a bunch of stars. So I would probably, come in here and just look and see if this made me more efficient at programming Arduino in Visual Studio Code. So as I continue to get better as a software engineer, the amount of plugins and the amount of extensions I'm using might change over time. And if you go to your next company and they're using PHP or Python or any of these other programming languages, you can come in here and just type in an extension, and get nice tools to support that language as well. Any questions about any of this? No? All right. Everybody got all the extensions and plugins installed? Awesome. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to start learning Markdown, which is really our first opportunity to code inside of our editor, and we're going to continue playing with GitHub. We're going to make new projects and spend some time exploring what Markdown does for us and why it's an important skill to just be aware of, right? Okay, it's 4:40. Let's come back at 5 o'clock. Restart the recording. We kind of zoomed on through it, and I was looking at our slides. I have it written down here in the slides. Is everyone, and there's like no shame or judgment, is everyone here aware of all the default keyboard shortcuts for doing things like copying and pasting, or cutting, undo and redo? Are you guys familiar with those? Do we want to spend any time here, or like? We can show all these off. These are very important keyboard shortcuts, and they're not just for coding. You're going to use these in Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office, but we spent a little bit of time talking about it in the last class because some of the people that were in that program were not as computer savvy as you folks seem to be. But I wanted to make sure we didn't jump on ahead. So by like a show of hands, do you want to spend any time talking about this, or if you need one-on-one instruction, we can do it Friday as well if you want. Everybody good? The one to really point out that is probably one you haven't seen before is Alt-Z. And what that does is that turns on word wrap, which is useful when we're working in our code editor. Let me pull up I don't have a Visual Studio window. If I pull up Visual Studio over here, right? As you're typing, right? You notice how it's going off the screen. If I press Alt-Z here, it turns on word wrapping. So this is all line 1. And if I type, right, line 2 is now on the next page. So I use Alt-Z pretty often, especially in this class when I'm sharing my screen because the window is so much smaller. But Alt-Z is a pretty good one, and that's probably less common, Alt-Z. And for you on Macs, it might be Option or it might be Alt. You'd have to just kind of fiddle around with your settings. Cool. So next we're going to play with Markdown. We've been talking about this is our first thing we're going to do that's kind of code-like. And we've been kind of exposed to this already when we create repositories. So what I'd like everyone to do is just kind of follow along because we're going to need we're going to have some time today to do this as practice because there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do with Markdown that is really interesting, okay? So I'm going to make a brand new repository. I'm going to call this Markdown Practice, right? Give it a name, Markdown Practice Repo. And I'm going to make this public. That's fine. I'm going to add a README. I'm going to add a getignore, and I'm going to pick node. Okay, even though we're not going to write node in here. And I'm going to choose a license, and I'm going to say this is MIT. Great. I could have, not put a getignore. I could have not put a license. It's just a good habit to have when I'm creating a repository. So I've now got this Markdown Practice repository. I'm going to follow that exact same step that we've been doing before. I'm going to copy this information from SSH, and I'm going to open up my terminal, and I'm going to go into a brand new folder. So I'm in my CBC13 folder, and I'm going to simply run git clone and paste in this link. Okay. So now I have a brand new project on my computer that is tied to this GitHub repository that we just created. So, because we just learned about Visual Studio Code, I'm going to do probably the rest of this in here, or at least get it started along the way. So I'm going to open up this folder, which is in CBC13. What do we call it? Markdown Practice. Great. I'm going to select the folder. So everything, yes, I always trust. So you can see that these are the 3 files that GitHub has created for us. Our getignore has a whole bunch of log files and stuff ignored. Our license file, this is the MIT license we selected. I'll make this even bigger. And then our README, it has a .md file format. That is what was showing up on this page, right? In here, where it says Markdown Practice. We were kind of looking at this a little bit yesterday. if I pull this back up and I look at our README, this is the format of Markdown. Markdown is a language, or is a style of text editing, kind of like this, that has a couple of rules around it, but it lets you write pages that look nice when they're generated, when they're ran on a place that understands Markdown, but it's a very easy to read format, so you can write all of your notes here. As someone who takes notes all day long, I almost always use the Markdown format, even just taking notes for myself, because if I ever save those notes somewhere, or if I'm using an editor that has Markdown understood, like this one does, right? It's because we installed that plugin and it says it understands Markdown. As we're typing in here, it's showing you a little bit of a preview of what it's going to kind of look like when we do Markdown. All right, so first, let's just kind of go from top to bottom, right? Generally, you're going to want to start your documents with a top-level heading, think of it like a title or something like that. Okay, you don't have to. All of these rules can be done in any type of order, but if we think of it like from that, right? The first is a pound, right? So this is like a heading 1. Okay. Then we have the option to do 2 pounds, which is like a heading 2, right? And so I'm going to save this so you can see what it looks like in real time on GitHub. So I'm going to go into my version control here, and I'm going to say adds more headings, right? I'm going to check in that change with the plus sign and commit, and then push. Okay, so I'm doing all the same stuff we've been doing at GitHub, but I'm just using the Visual Studio version. And I'm also going to pull up a terminal so that I can show it both ways as well, right? So we're going to just kind of interchange between them, because it's really important that you understand what Git is doing behind the scenes and be very comfortable with committing code, checking in your changes, and then pushing it up to GitHub. Okay. So I'm going to leave this little terminal over here. But now that I push my code up here, right, we added those things. You can see this was a heading 1, and then we made a heading 1 here, and then we made a heading 2 here. Let's just keep going down the line, right? So as I'm sure you can imagine, 3 pound signs is going to be a heading 3. And then also, 4 is a heading 4. Okay. And if we were to go git add dot git commit dash n adds more headings, right? And then git push origin main is going to push it up to GitHub. We can see that it did that in our terminal output here, right? All right, cool. So then we can reload over here. We can see now that we have a heading 3 and a heading 4. Now, I don't know if GitHub specifically... So this is one of the downsides to Markdown, is that Markdown is a set of guidelines and suggestions for how to treat this, this style of text. But each and every place that uses Markdown can choose which of those rules to apply. And so GitHub does some specific things that are GitHub specific that aren't really a part of Markdown, like linking to other repositories and understanding, like GitHub has this issue tracking system, so if you wanted to use it for project management, it's in here. So it understands some of that stuff in its Markdown syntax as well, but it's not really a part of Markdown as a language. It's just extra stuff. So let's try, let's see if it has more headings. All right, let's try 5. Heading 5, and then let's try heading 6. Heading 6. I don't know if this is going to work. We're just kind of experimenting as we go. And so I'm going to do git add dot and git commit dash n adds more headings and git push origin main. Let's see if this works. Great. So all I did here is I used these double ampersands to run each of these commands in line. Okay, this is just another shortcut. I'm just kind of showing you a bunch of different ways to do things because all of these ways are correct. Okay, but let's check over here in GitHub and see if they, okay, yeah, so they keep on going down, right? So you can see a heading 1 is the biggest, and it puts a nice little border underneath it. A heading 2 is kind of big, like that's like a chapter heading, okay? And then a heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, and then heading 6 is the smallest, and it, I don't know if you can kind of tell here, but it's also making it a little bit lighter, a little bit darker of a gray. So those are all the heading types that you have to work with in Markdown. And the format for that is extremely simple. Right? You just get little hashtags here, or a pound sign. Okay? They treat any text that's standing on its own as a paragraph, right? So generally you'd have a heading and you could say this text here is in a paragraph, right? And so we were talking about the importance of lorem ipsum. If you were designing this as an actual web page or a document you care about, and you're just trying to get the structure in place, we have a function that's built in called, if we just type lorem 50, no, it didn't work. Oh, because I'm in a thing. Lorem. I must have it turned off. I'll have to fix that later. But normally you would generate your. So let's go to our plugin and see if it will tell us how to do it. Lorem ipsum. Come on, man. It's like loading or something. Oh. My window was too big and it wasn't showing up. Okay, so to use the extension, open the command palette F1 and type lorem ipsum. Okay. So that's what we got to do. I'm going to press F1 and do lorem ipsum. Right? Perfect. And so you can see I've just now added a paragraph of text into the thing. So let's do it again. F1, lorem ipsum, right? And if I put in another paragraph, lorem ipsum, great. So Markdown by default kind of treats any text that doesn't have any special tags or anything in it as a paragraph, right? So this is all misspelled. That's fine. Cool. And then if we pull up our terminal, I can run that same command by pressing up, and it's going to check in the. Maybe we want to change our commit message. Right? Adds some paragraphs. Cool. And so we've got that in there, and now we can verify that that code is there by checking on Markdown. Right. So behind the scenes, what this is letting us do is just write regular text, and GitHub or any other website that is doing Markdown type of parsing is giving us nicely styled text that matches the flow of the page, right? So a lot of times, and I think we mentioned this a little bit yesterday, when you're working on code, when you're working on a team, you're going to write a whole bunch of information in here that tells you how to run the project, gives you documentation about how to install it and things like that, and they're all using Markdown to make it look nice and to have links and other information that need to be there. Okay. Cool. What else? All right. So that is headings and paragraphs. Now we can also make a whole bunch of other. I'm gonna pull up a Markdown cheat sheet. What else do we want to cover? Okay, great. So let's say we're in here and we're working in our paragraphs. I'm gonna take out some of these paragraphs here because these are gonna drive me crazy. Okay, perfect. So we've got text here, right? If we wanted to make something bold in here, right? In HTML, it would be, when we learn this later on this week, it would be a strong tag where we're saying, hey, make this text here bold. But what we can do in Markdown without having to know any tags or anything special is that we can just add asterisks, 2 asterisks. So we put 2 asterisks to start and 2 asterisks to end. And you can see that because we installed that plugin, what Markdown is doing for us here is that it's making it showing you a little bit of in your editor that like, hey, this is going to be bold now, okay? If we wanted to make something italicized, right? So let's even be more explicit. This is bold text, right? And I'll put in a asterisks, okay? And then I can say this is italicized. Okay? Italicizing is with 1 asterisk. Okay, and you can see that it kind of showed it here in my editor. Okay, and if we were to save and commit, so let's do it this way now. I'm going to click the plus sign on the change to the README file and say adds bold and italics. Okay, check this in and push. So when we reload that page, now you can see it's kind of hard to see because GitHub, I'm using the dark theme. If I was to switch, let's see if I can change this to the light theme. Appearance, maybe? Yeah, here we go. Day theme. Single theme. Okay, the light. Cool. Did it save it already? Yeah, good. Yeah. So if I reload this page, right? You can see that it gives it a little bit of a darker, like a black, right? And then the italicized is like that. That white is going to drive me crazy. So we're going back to night theme. Appearance. Good. Perfect. Reload the page. All right. What else can we do with Markdown? We also can put in quotes, right? So I'm going to put in. Let me pull up my code here. All right. So I can say if you put in a single arrow a greater than sign, like we've been using for some other. Yeah, go ahead, Olivia.
Sorry, how do you make it bold and italic? Do you do 3 asterisks on each side?
Yeah, probably. Right.
Oh, okay.
Let's try. Good question. All right, let's try it with a. We'll keep that one italicized. This is bold and italic. Right, let's try that. Let's put one there, and let's try. Let's see if that works. Yeah. Testing. Okay, hit enter. Reload. Yeah, it didn't work. How can we make things bold and italic in Markdown? I mean, we could probably cheat if we had extra letters. Let's try this. So, what if I went so that it knows? Maybe test another idea. Check mark and push. Oh, it didn't work either. So the short answer is it appears that you cannot, right? You get to choose one or the other. And that's, Markdown was not intended to be the best way to write code, okay? It's just a really simple format to let you take notes and add a little bit of style to it, right? So it's a very simplistic language. There might be some Markdown interpreters that, like, because you'll see Markdown show up in a lot of commenting systems like Reddit. I think they use a similar type of flavor for this. A Stack Overflow, where we're going to get help as software engineers. A lot of places that are like more geek-oriented, I should say, are going to use Markdown. And they're all going to implement it a little bit differently. So I think there's probably some document here in GitHub that will tell you what their version is, because they have some extra stuff that they've added to that is GitHub specific. But it doesn't do everything. We can make things bold and italic all day long in HTML, but this implementation of Markdown does not support that. So let's take this out. The next thing, if we wanted to have a nice quotation system, or if we had like worker bees can leave, even drones can fly away, the queen is their slave, right? So I made a nice little haiku here, right? This little greater than sign tells it that anything that follows this is a block quote, right? So you sometimes use them for like only idiots argue on the internet, right? Like Abraham Lincoln, right? So you make fake quotes and stuff, right? And I'll show you what that looks like. Adds quotes. Push. Reload, right? It's gonna. So it's giving you those with like a little gray box on the side, and that kind of gives it a little bit of indentation. So you'll notice here that even though I had these on different lines, right? Worker bees can leave, even drones can fly away. The queen of that. This little haiku, it smushed it all into one line. Okay, and that's a shortcoming of both HTML and Markdown, but there is a way to get around it, and I'm going to show you that here in a second. The problem is, it assumes that all white space should be compressed. So if you've got a new line character, it thinks, I don't need that new line character. And so Markdown, behind the scenes, is treating this as like, this is all one line. And this is kind of counterintuitive, but it's just the way things have to be. If you add 2 spaces at the end of each line that you want to be on a new line, okay, and then we say that you can't see it, but they're there, right? You can see that there's two little spaces. If we check this in now, adds new lines to my haiku. Right? Push. Now it should, now it renders as 3 separate lines. So you have some capability here to control the output format, and you just have to know that, like, it's just one of those things you just have to memorize, where it's like in Markdown I've got to do this extra weird step and add 2 spaces at the end of the lines when I want there to be a new line. Okay, so we've covered these are block quotes, and we're going to learn each and every one of these Markdown things that we're learning here today. We're going to learn these exact same things in how to implement them in HTML later this week and then into next week. So we'll probably use this type of Markdown practice as the foundation for what we do when we start learning HTML, right? Because each and every one of these things behind the scenes, if I was to inspect this element just to show you behind the scenes, right, it is creating a block quote tag and then putting the information in a paragraph and then adding that line break that we added by putting in 2 spaces. Okay, so all of this Markdown is generating HTML, which is why it's such an efficient technology, and why all these geek-oriented companies like GitHub and Stack Overflow use it, because they can take regular text that people are just typing into a comment box, and with a few simple programming rules, convert all those into tags. Okay. So let's take a look at some other things we can do with Markdown. Let me pull up my.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
So you can make something italic and bold by keeping the stars together without any spaces.
All of them together, like 3?
3 together, yep.
Bold and italic. Oh, cool. Okay.
And then you can use, I want to say it's the underscore on either side with, I think it's like 1 or 2 of them. It should work.
Mm-hmm. Let's check it. Underscore.
Try 2 of them. There you go.
Okay, cool. That's like, yeah, that makes it bold. So you can use, it seems like asterisk or underscores for both of those things. Okay, that broke. If you do 3. So you can use asterisks and underscores interchangeably. So this is what to me makes it like such a really effective format. And I use this in my text messaging when I'm sending messages to my friends and family. I will make things bold just by putting asterisks in it, even though the system that I'm sending it through, the phone, doesn't even know what Markdown is. But you can visually see, like, hey, that's important. That's important words. So it's a thing that you'll probably eventually start doing as well, the longer you're in this career field, is that some of your work habits and things that you do in your daily life will kind of transfer over into your regular communications. All right, so let's take a look at some other things, right? I'm going to make a new heading here. I'm going to say heading 2, and I'm going to make this lists, right? So by default, right, we know there's a couple different main types of lists, and Markdown provides us 2 of them, the ones that are most important right off the bat. So the first one is if we put in a dash and we say hello, right? Let's, I'll make this unordered list, right? So I'll say, cheese, bread, mustard. Right? So when we put little dashes in here, it's making an unordered list. And what an unordered list is, we'll check this in and show that this way. Unordered list. Check mark and push. An unordered list is just a list of things, and I'm sure you've seen this a bunch of times on the internet. It's got a little dot next to it, okay? And it doesn't have any indication of what is more or less important. Okay, so this is called an unordered list. And behind the scenes, when we start learning HTML next week, I clicked the wrong thing. This is actually, the unordered list tag is a UL tag, right? So UL for unordered list, and that's all Markdown is doing behind the scenes to create that. Now, there is also an ordered list, and the easiest way to do this in Markdown is, I'll make another heading. So we'll say ordered list, right? We just start off with a 1, and we say, wake up, work out, drink coffee, make money, right? Something like that. And if we, you notice that as I typed 1 and a period after it, like I was writing an actual list with numbers, our Markdown editor inside of Visual Studio Code was smart enough to realize, like, hey, what comes next is 2. What comes next is 3. Right? And so it added those numbers for me. I didn't have to type them in. And if I was to type enter right now, the next line is going to start with a 5. Okay? Sleep. And so let's check in our changes. Make it more restricted. Ordered lists. Check mark and push. And if we reload our page over here, now we see we have an ordered list. And just like with the unordered list, behind the scenes, it has created for us an OL tag, which is our ordered list HTML tag. And then all of our list items are in here. The cool thing about unordered lists, the cool thing about ordered lists is that these numbers were added for us by our text editor, but Markdown, the interpreter, doesn't really. I mean, we can see. Let's see what happens here if we do this. Change numbers in our list. Okay, and I pushed and reload. You'll notice that I changed all my numbers to 1 dot, 1 dot, 1 dot, 1 dot. HTML does not work that way. HTML says this is an ordered list because Markdown turned it into an ordered list, and ordered lists count in the browser from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, on and on. And so we have just told it the Markdown format for starting an ordered list is just a number and a dot. That's what tells Markdown this is an ordered list. And so it doesn't matter what these numbers are. This could be, okay. Markdown doesn't care. It's still going to treat this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So even though, it was nice enough to give us a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, right? Those are just visual pleasantries to make it easier for us to work with. Because behind the scenes, all of this Markdown is being converted to HTML. Okay, what else do we have? If we wanted to write some code or share some code with each other, I mean, a good example of this is if we were writing documentation. We can say code blocks, right? So it starts with a backtick, which on everyone's keyboard should be the key that's directly to the left of your 1 key, right? So it's a backtick, and anything we put in here is going to be formatted to look kind of like code. It's going to use a mono-spaced font, hopefully, and should show up as, some code places, some places will actually even syntax highlight it for us. So let's see what GitHub does for us. Adds code block. Okay. Then we push. Yeah, so it made it gray in the background, and it says you can tell that the font has changed a little bit, right? There's another thing that we can do here. Let me see if I'm not sure if this will work. While we're doing this, right? So let's say we're inside of a heading, and we wanted to add more content, but we wanted to add some separation visually to let us know, like, hey, this is a different section. If we put in 3 dashes, for example, 3 dashes, which is like the minus key on your keyboard, right next to the plus. 3 dashes is going to create a horizontal line that goes through the page. So this is like a horizontal rule. Okay. The other thing we can do, I believe, is if we type it like this, we can say alert, hello, console.log, something. Okay. And 3 there. I'm not sure if this will work in GitHub or not, but we'll test it out and see it. So normally, when you do one of these, like one backtick, it's a single line of code. Usually, when you do 3 backticks, it will be multi-line code. So let's test it. Testing multi-line code blocks. Push. Yeah, perfect. So this is even better, right? GitHub has added some extra magic in here. And I don't know if you guys can really see this super well, but when I hover over this, they know this is multiple lines of code. They created automatically for us a copy to clipboard button. So that if I was using this for documentation and this was important, right? We have this code option up here that like shows me this is a line of code to run. But if you use those 3 backticks, we can make it so that this is being copied to our clipboard so that we could come into another editor, for example. And if we were trying to use this as an example, right? We're pasting literally that code that was in that example documentation. That is super cool, and that's new. That didn't exist a month ago when we were teaching this last time. That's neat. So those are the types of code blocks. Now, if you wanted to link to someplace, right? So that's a pretty common use case. The link format is super weird. So let's just give ourselves a new heading. So we'll say linking to other pages. Right? So the format for this is square brackets with a title of the link. So we can say like Google. All right, let's make this even more. So click here to go to Google. Okay. And then the actual URL goes right after that, and we say https google.com. Okay, so let's see, we're correct. So square brackets and this. Okay. And what that's going to do is it's going to replace that with a link. So if we pull this up again, let's check in our code. Let's say adds link to Google. Check. And push. So if we reload, you can see that this now is a link that goes to Google. Okay? So I can inspect that. And behind the scenes, this is just creating an anchor tag, which we're going to learn about when we learn HTML. So all this Markdown is really doing is it's letting us take simple to read text. You could share this document. You could turn this in at a college class, and anybody with eyeballs can read this and know, like, hey, this is formatted a little weird, but it's readable, right? Like it has some structure here. This is why I use it as a note-taking format, because I can be like, this is just words, right? There's nothing special. There's no code tags or anything weird. And the things that are here, like the ones that are kind of weird, like link to Google, you can kind of figure out from context that I'm trying to include some remote link. Like it's not hard to read. The other cool thing about links like that is that we can interchange all of these different things, right? So we know like, my name or my website, and then I could put ericharrison.info. Yes, ericharrison.info, right? So I'm combining the unordered list with some text that also has a link inside of it, and so I can put in, let's add another one. My LinkedIn is And so when we push this up to GitHub now, it adds a list of links. And then push. So close that. Right. You can see now I've got an unordered list that has a couple of words and links to remote websites. Right. So LinkedIn profile and portfolio page. Cool. Anything else? Okay. Yeah. If you wanted to add an image, or you wanted to include a link to an image, let's see if we can find one real quick. Google cat picture. This guy's cute. Let's copy image address. Where does this go to? Yeah, good enough. All right, so I've got a link to an image here. If I wanted to put in an image here, it uses a similar format to this link concept, so we'll say image. This is a cute kitty. Right? But what it is that makes it different is you put an exclamation point in front of it. And then what goes in here is some alternate text. So you can say, this is a cat picture. And then what goes inside the parentheses here is the actual URL to the picture of the cat, or the picture that you're trying to include. So we'll say, adds cat pic. Sure. Good. And push. And so if we go back to our GitHub now, there you go. It's embedded a picture of a cat. Obviously, this is huge, right? We probably wouldn't want to put a big picture like this, but we just pulled this off the internet, so it's fine. So, cool. Awesome. That's pretty much the highlights. The other thing you can do, let's do it above the cat picture. Is you can also make tables, and tables are it's another one that's kind of a weird format, so just kind of bear with us here. Let's say tables of info. Right? The table format uses the pipe symbol, which is on your computer. You know how there's like I guess it's a backslash. If you press shift and backslash, it gives you a vertical pipe. This is called pipe. And we're going to use this same symbol in programming quite a bit. And this is one of the reasons why when we had the typing test at the beginning of the week, we had the programming typing test, because you're going to have to start getting used to hitting weird keys that you probably haven't hit ever in your entire life. And pipe is a good one. Greater than sign is a good one. Less than sign is a good one. The ampersand. You're going to use these keys all the time. And if it's really just helpful to start building that into your muscle memory now, so that when you think, when I'm writing code, or when I'm running some commands on my computer, when I think of the word "and," where I'm saying I want to run this command and that command, and to me is, two ampersands, because that's what it is in programming, and that's what it is to run as a command. So start building that into so that when you think these things, your fingers automatically hit those keys. And pipe is a good one. So it's pipe is shift and then backspace. On most of your keyboards, it should be right above your return key. So to do a table, we do a pipe, and then on the very first line of this table, what we're doing here is we're defining our table headings. So we can put like username, email address, favorite color. Right? And then to go to the next line of the table, what we do is we basically just do a pipe, and then we put in lines until we're there, lines until we're there, and then lines until we're there. So that's going to say, hey, those were the table headings. These are the table headings. And then everything that occurs below this is the information in the table. Right? So I can put in Eric at Harrison.co, favorite color blue. Right? And then I do another line, and you'll notice these don't even match up. Right? We could make these line up if we wanted to, but it's not important. All that matters is Markdown knows that this is starting a table because we started with this format. So we can just really easily and quickly build tables out this way. So we can say, Meg at Harrison.co, and her favorite color is orange. And a table is going to give you a table tabular information. Right? So let's check this in ads, table. Okay, check mark. And push. It should be above our cat. Yeah. So it looks like this, right? It's given us nice little rows and columns, and it even GitHub is nice enough to give us. It even alternates the colors, right? So if I added more and more lines, each line is going to be alternating differences of background color, right? So it's just a nice way to, if I had a list of users or a bunch of information that made sense to put in a table, the Markdown format to do that is this weird syntax. So those are pretty much the highlights. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give everybody this. Okay, so the cool thing about GitHub, right, is this is all public. You guys can all go and see this code, and if you click on this, where we go here to do this? If you click on README and you click the raw button, it's going to show you this is the actual code behind the scenes for Markdown. So this is like a really good. As we did this in the class, I just created a cheat sheet for you. Okay, this is showing off all the things that you can do with Markdown. Okay, what we're going to do, it's 5:37 right now. What I want everyone to do is create a new repository, and we're going to name it like Markdown Portfolio. And what I want you to do is be a little bit creative here. So between it's 5:40 right now. We're going to give everybody until 6:30, so almost a full hour, to make kind of your first version of a portfolio page. So we want to have your name, we want to have some contact information, we want to have a paragraph about you. If you've got a LinkedIn portfolio, if you've got Twitter accounts, things like that, we want to have you create this as if you were building a web page using nothing but Markdown. Does everyone kind of understand the concept here? So we're going to build our first portfolio page using Markdown. So you're going to make a new repository, and you're going to make this page in Markdown. So at 6:30, we're going to come back and we're going to do show and tell. Everyone's going to show off what they built, and I'm going to send a link to this page to everyone else so that you can view the cheat sheet. So this will be in our CBC13 channel. Okay. And I'll send a link to the. Here, this is the main one as well. Right. Okay. See everybody back at 6:30. And I'll be here also. I might actually go get some food since we have a little break. This was smart of me. I'm glad I planned this. So it's going to tell us there's a picture that has not been tracked by version control. So I'm going to do git add. I can just tab complete that, and then git commit -n adds Rocket League screenshot. Right? And then I'm going to do git push origin main so that it's pushed up to GitHub. And what we can do now is if we come back to our portfolio, our main repository here, we can see that I have a picture in here, and it is available for us to use now. Right? So all I have to do to get the URL to this picture is I can right-click on this and do copy image address right here. Okay, it's going to give me my full URL to that image. Okay, hosted in GitHub. So if I wanted to use this image in my Markdown, I can simply, now that I have it copied to my clipboard, I can say, let's add it in here. I love Rocket League. This is the best game. All right, exclamation point, Rocket League scoreboard, right? And I just paste in the address to the image. So this is one way. And as soon as I'm gonna have to still commit that change. I already committed the image up into it, but now I got the URL that GitHub is storing that image at. And so when I commit this now and I say adds RL scoreboard image, and I commit and push, now this is going to look terrible because I picked an image that's huge. Okay, it didn't look so bad, right? It shows the image embedded in this page. Right? That's one way. That's one full step. Okay? I think that there might be another way as well. Let's see if we can do this. So I'm going to take this image. Because I am the owner of this repository, I can drag a file. Here, I'll show you. Cancel. I can drag a file from my folder directly into here. So it's uploading it into the repository already, right? As if I had done a commit and done a push. Okay. So now all I have to do to say, yes, I want to save this, I'm going to click commit changes. Okay, and so now I have two images in here, right? One of them is linked in here already, but I could have just dragged and dropped that image into GitHub. And now to get the URL of the image, right, I would click on the one, and the way to do it is you just right click, copy image address. Is everyone following along? Because we need the URL. So the URL is the image address, and in GitHub's case, it goes to github.com, the name of the thing, then /blob/main, the name of the image, and then raw equals true. Because if we took raw equals true off, it's going to give us this same interface. Like this is the page that it's loading for us. But when we say raw equals true, it just sends the image. Okay. Oh, I did awesome in this game. I want to change my screenshot to this. Oh boy. I'm going to do that. Raw equals true. Better screenshot. Okay. Checkbox or check mark and then push. So now if we check our thing here, right? Oh, I'm gonna have an error because I made changes. Okay, so sometimes you're gonna get this kind of error, right? So we haven't really covered how to deal with get issues. So we were trying to change our version control. Okay, we were trying to change something in GitHub, but GitHub is ahead of us in the future, right? So it says can't push refs to remote. Try running pull first to integrate your changes. So we were trying. GitHub was more in the future than we are, and we were trying to change a file. Git is smart enough to block us from doing this action, right? If I was to do this, I'll run it here in the console. It's going to be the same warning that just popped up, and it's going to give you all the information you need to solve this problem. It's going to say, failed to push some refs to whatever. Hint: updates were rejected because the remote is GitHub in this case, contains work that you do not have locally. This is usually caused by another repository pushing to the same ref. You want to first integrate the remote changes, git pull, before pushing again. So it's telling you the solution to this problem right here in the message. So it's saying run git pull first. So I'm going to run git pull. And now you can see that it pulled down that picture that I just uploaded on GitHub. And now if I do git push, now my changes are sent up correctly. And so now when we reload our page, right, this was the screenshot we used originally, but now it's the screenshot where I scored 6 goals and made 2 saves and scored 1,000 points. Okay? So that's the 2 ways really that are really easy to get images into your Markdown. You still have to have your code, right? It still has to display the link in your, oh, I got the terminal so big. Right, you still have to have the link as a part of the syntax here. But GitHub, because it's happy to host all of your content already, you can upload it to GitHub first. Okay, is everyone kind of following along there? Cool. All right. So what's next? Yeah, we covered most of that. Emojis, code blocks, man, we're plowing through things. All right, it's 6:49, as has been the case every day this week, because we're trying to do things kind of iteratively and slowly. We have a lot of time left open for questions, or if there's anything, I heard a lot of you say I'd like to talk to you on Friday, but this is time for learning as well. So if there's something we'd like to dive deeper on, or because if one of you is having an issue, maybe it's not clear to other people as well, but you're kind of just faking the funk. So what would we like to talk about with kind of our last hour here? Open floor. We can talk about Git. We can talk about anything.
Can I possibly share my screen?
Absolutely.
So I have no clue what's going on right now.
Sure.
Okay, this is what I was working on.
Okay. So you are using the VI editor for your Git commits. So we'll have to fix that. Okay. Unfortunately, you're on Windows, right? Or is this? Yeah.
No, this is Mac.
Okay, that's why. So on Unix, the default text editor for a console is usually a program called VI. And then VI is like an old-fashioned Unix text editor. It's one of my favorites, but it's a little bit complicated and super crazy. So we're going to have to get you out of this and then configure your terminal to use Nano as the default. So here's what we do. Press your mouse into that box down at the bottom, the terminal window. Yep. And then we're going to press escape. Nope. Click on the terminal inside, like where you have clear or any of those things. Yep. More to the right.
Hold on, let me move.
All right. You can just click the hide button there if you want.
Okay.
Hide that little pop-up window. Yep. So click your mouse in this box, the terminal.
Okay.
So that we're focused on that panel. Yep.
The terminal.
Yep.
Got it.
You're exactly right. Okay, so you're going to hit escape. Okay. And now you're going to press shift and colon, right? So we want to do like an actual colon, not a semicolon. So shift and colon. Okay. And now we're going to press the letter Q and an exclamation point. Okay. And hit enter. Perfect. Okay. So Vim is an excellent text editor, but it has, so you remember we were talking about all the differences with text editors and why we would want to use one over the other. Vim is an old-fashioned, better version of a source code editor, but it makes a few weird assumptions that haven't really been the case for editing since the 70s. And some of those assumptions are, it's what's called a stateful editor. So by default, you are not in insert mode. You're going to use a whole bunch of keyboard commands to edit and move around the file. If you want to write, then you press a special command that gets you into insert mode so that you can then start typing, and then you leave insert mode and you do a bunch of stuff. There's a ton of power behind it, and if you're good at Vim, you will be faster than you are in Visual Studio. It's just an amazing program, but it's crazy, and we don't want to even spend any time teaching that here. So let me look up real quickly. Change default text editor map. Console. Oh wait, we want to do change default Git editor.
So the command we use :Q exclamation point quits whatever we're working on.
Yep, it got you out of Vim, but we're gonna have you run a program that will change that for your entire computer, so that when you run it in the command line or in the console, instead of running Vim, it's going to run Nano. So I'm going to paste this in chat right now. And anyone else who's on a Mac, you probably need to run this command as well. And we're going to run git config global, and then we're going to do core.editor nano. So if you just paste that right into your thing and run it, now your editor will be Nano, and hit enter.
That was it?
That's it. And so now if you now you should be able to do git push and git commit. So if you type git commit right now, it's going to show you Nano instead of Vim.
They only need to do this once and it's good.
Until you get a new computer, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is another one of those one-time things that you just have to do.
Okay.
So now if you put your commit message up here in the top, like updates my portfolio or whatever.
You always have to have a name after commit, right?
So normally we've been running git commit -m, where you put your commit message as a part of your thing. But when you run git commit by itself, it brings up an editor. No, so you're in an editor right now. You're in Nano. And so it's expecting you to put in your commit message here. So you see how you're in like a file editor? It says GNU Nano 2.06. All you have to do is just type in your commit message on this line. So whatever you just changed in your README file.
Okay.
Yep, and then just Control X to close that. You have to hold down Control and hit X. And then click Y to save your changes. And then hit Enter. If you're muted, I can't hear you. Perfect. So your commit now worked, and so now you can do git push. Perfect. You're still muted, Karif.
No, I was saying I guess I have to work at it because right now.
You have to you have to reload the page. So Command R, or you can click the reload button. Perfect.
Okay.
Nice
Okay. Okay. So now when I git push, it would always push, and I would have to add a message before I push.
You add a message in your commit. When you run git commit, that requires a message.
Okay.
And the other way you can do it, you're doing it in the command line right now. You could have also used in Visual Studio Code. You see that little menu option on the left where it's got a little 1 next to it? That one right there. Click that again. So you've got 2 projects open, it looks like. So each project has its own, like you can commit there. If you made a change, so you see how it says changes. If you click that down arrow next to changes, it's showing that there were changes that need to be made, and you could have committed them from here as well.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. This whole week, one of the big challenges with starting up a class like this is that we got to get everyone's computers working the same way and capable of doing, following the instructions and following along. Is there anybody else that's having technical issues that we need to solve, and anything that's causing some frustration? Or are we all pretty good now? Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about? Markdown, version control, Visual Studio Code.
I had I guess, clarification. So this Markdown language, outside of, like, it's not going to be something that's used often. Is that correct? It's more like you were saying, like the geekier sites or like GitHub or something like that. Like, would we be using this like once we actually get into it and are creating websites? Are we going to be using Markdown?
Probably for anything other than like when you're making repositories and stuff.
Okay.
You need GitHub is going to display a readme.md file, so you'll have to write your own documentation.
Okay.
Some companies like here's a really great example of why you would probably need to use Markdown on a pretty frequent basis. Most companies will use some kind of project management system that assigns you tasks. So it'll be like, Josh, you're working on task 16, and task 16 is build out a payment page, right? While you're doing that work, you're interacting with that project management tracker system, taking notes and updating statuses and stuff. A lot of those project trackers use Markdown as their way of letting you have better content in your notes. So just a great example is that link format, for example. You know, you'll use that link format all the time if you're like, hey, this references issue 15 at this address. Or if you wanted to include a screenshot of what you're seeing, you know, to get feedback, like here's my mock-up, here's a screenshot of it, you would use the image version to include a link to that screenshot. So you will use Markdown occasionally. You probably won't build full-on like portfolio pages in Markdown. You'll never do that probably, but you will use Markdown in little bits and pieces here and there. You'll use it in GitHub. You'll use it in GitHub issues. You'll use it in project management tools. Clubhouse is one of those. Bitbucket is another pretty popular project management thing for software engineers. So you're going to see it all over the place, and you're going to, you'll start to notice it in places like Reddit if you're on social media, where you'll notice that like, hey, how do I include a link in my post and make it look like it's organic? They're using Markdown, right? So it's that same format. Good question. And so, you know, as I mentioned, I've just gotten in the habit of when I take notes or when I'm writing just text, I'm using Markdown with, you know, regardless of if it's even going to be in a place that uses Markdown. To me, I can type a note, and bold means 2 asterisks around the word I want to bold. That means pay attention to this.
I just want you to know I feel like the old man trying to work the iPhone right now.
No, you're not old. I'm old. I've been doing this forever. What else? Any other questions? Any other thing we want to dive deeper in? Or do you just want to kind of spend a little bit more time processing what we've learned so far? Tomorrow we're going to start learning HTML, so that's when things really kick into high gear. And there's no turning back from that. Go ahead, Eric.
So when we have homework, is the homework just like a sort of a recap of what we did yesterday?
Yeah, usually. I'm a big believer in like, there's my personal learning style, and this is like, you know, please feel free to give feedback, right? Because I'm happy to change this course to meet your needs as well. We treat the lectures, that's like the part where we're talking, is I'm going to try and provide like a high-level overview of all the stuff we're learning. Okay, so you know, we've been kind of going day by day, where we learned Markdown a little bit today. Tomorrow we're going to learn some HTML for the first time. I'm just trying to expose you to some concepts and show you how it works a little bit. Okay, then the homework that you do during the lab of the following day is designed to just let you start typing those things in a way that like gets you comfortable doing the stuff that we saw the day before. As you'll start to see when you know, tomorrow really kind of kicks this off, but we go into high gear next week. Everything we do from here on out builds on the previous days. So we're going to start learning HTML tomorrow. Then we're going to learn even more HTML on Monday. And then we're going to start bringing in CSS, which is how we style our HTML. And so, you know, we're going to start off with something simple like make a simple web page. And tomorrow we might even do this exact scenario that we had here, which is like make this portfolio page in Markdown. I'm going to say, hey, now I want you to make this in HTML. This is exactly what you did. And then when we get to like Monday or Tuesday, then we're going to style it with CSS. And I'm going to say, okay, that's great, but now we want to put it, now we want to style it like, you know, pretty fonts and nice background colors and all that kind of stuff. So each and everything we do hopefully reinforces what we learned the day before or even the days before. So that's always the intention. When we get a little bit later in the course, when you guys know some more stuff, then it'll even be more freeform. So you'll have homework that's like build a project that, you know, like some of the examples that we showed off on Monday, you know, build a project that, you know, plays a video game, blackjack. Or we had some people, one of our students last class was passionate about golf. He's a big time golfer, and so he spent most of his time during the class working on a golf tracking app, so he could track his shot distances, and he used that as a way to connect with the with the learning. So I would encourage you, and I'm going to continue to encourage you to, if I give you a project that is like, hey, work on any kind of website you want, right? Start thinking about what are you passionate about, because I would like for you to focus on building things that you care about as much as possible, because each and every one of these projects that you do during this class, hopefully, will be going into your portfolio, so that when you start shopping, looking around for a job and getting interviews, kind of getting towards week 12, and beyond, you've got all this stuff that we worked on together to show off and kind of highlight all the things you're passionate about. If there's too much homework, that's something we can definitely fix. If there's not enough homework, which was actually the feedback from the last class, they said, especially when we get into JavaScript, we talk about stuff. We're going to talk about stuff for like 4 straight hours in this class. And, aside from a few breaks, when we get into some of the programming stuff, we're going to be doing things over and over and over again. I just assumed, hey, we've got enough work to do in lab time, work on your portfolio, work on your projects, that I thought we didn't need to do as much homework. And the key piece of feedback from everybody was like, assign more tasks, like write a for loop to count to 100, right? Simple stuff. And we're going to have a bunch of those. We already have a bunch of those lined up, but they wanted more of it. So we'll probably try to do a little bit more of that this cohort as well. Go ahead, Olivia.
Will the homework always be sent at 12 and then have to be done by 4 p.m.?
No, sometimes we'll release it earlier. It's pretty much, I need to make sure that it's available for lab time, which is like 12 to 4. Sometimes if you guys like it earlier, we can do it after class. I can just release it now. It'll still be done at 4. So it's up to y'all.
Well, I would personally like it after, but it's really up to you.
No, I mean, I this entire course is for you. So
okay, then yes, I would like it after.
Easy peasy. The only reason I traditionally do not just by default release stuff afterwards is I don't want to create this unhealthy expectation where it's like, you just got done listening to me talk for 4 hours, and I immediately expect you to start working on stuff overnight. It's probably better to get like a good night's sleep, but I also sleep in quite a bit, so that's the reason it's been getting released at like 11, because that's when I'm rolling into work. So that's on me. Go ahead, Karif, yeah?
Yeah, the videos. When will you upload the videos?
I generally try to upload those immediately after the class is over. So the playlist that I shared tonight, or that I shared today, you can bookmark it, go to that every day. The video should be there. It generally takes like 30 minutes to upload the video because they're pretty big files. And then YouTube does some stuff behind the scenes where it encodes it and puts it in a bunch of different resolutions and stuff. That process takes like an hour or two. So I try to upload them as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Eric, go ahead.
So where can we find these videos?
It's in the channel topic of Slack.
Oh, okay.
There's a playlist.
All right. I also had another question. Just I guess sort of the whole point of me even coming to this school, and probably most people, is that I really wanted to come right out of this school and go right into a job. Do you think that would like necessarily be possible? Say if I do all the work and I also spend the 4 hours of like lab, like would I require like to take the extra months of like the clubhouse membership or whatever and learn extra, or can I like just come right out of the school and like in all likelihood somebody would hire me within a couple months?
So in the last class, as an example, one of our students started her job. So we had a graduation on Friday, and she started her job as a software engineer on a Monday, that following Monday. It's completely up to you how aggressive you want to be at getting a job. When we get to like week 8, that's pretty much the end of all the things we're teaching you about programming, and the remainder of the weeks is about working on projects. We spend a lot of our class time. I think we have an entire week where all we work on is common interview questions and getting you prepared for passing through software engineering interviews. The reason we worked on a portfolio as an example as the first thing is because by the time we get to like week 6 and you know all the HTML and JavaScript and stuff, you should have, or at least have been working on, your actual formal portfolio in a way that looks really good that you can be proud of. We're trying to set you up for success as much as possible. And so, how quickly you can get a job after graduation, I would encourage you to spend each and every second of your lab time working on stuff that is for you, building more projects. Like, I can't, because there's so many different people in here with so many different diverse backgrounds, I don't know what your schedule's like. I don't know how much time you can devote to this program. I'll share a YouTube video that I found. It wasn't this specific boot camp, but this guy has this really wonderful YouTube series, and he talks about his experience. He was much like a lot of you. He went to a boot camp in New York City, but by a different company, but a similar type of program where it was like 12 weeks long. And he put in 16 to 20 hours a day of extra work trying to make himself as amazing as possible. And his first job after getting out of that boot camp was at Google, being paid over 6 figures. Now, do we think that everybody is going to have that kind of drive or determination or passion to get right into Google as an entry-level software engineer and be making that kind of money? No, but it's completely up to you, and you could do that if you put in the effort and the time and energy. Getting into some of these bigger companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon, they are notoriously hard to get into because they try to surround themselves with the best and brightest software engineers in the world. If you put in the effort and you put in the energy to get there, there's nothing stopping you. So we try to structure this course to have as much free time as possible so that if you're motivated by getting a job or if you're driven to get a job as quickly as possible after graduating the course, there's nothing stopping you from doing so. What else? Or, if you're like Karif and you're entrepreneurial, the Clubhouse has an entrepreneur boot camp that's kind of like this one. You can go right from this to that and start a tech company with your new software engineering skills. Or you can, build a website that sells cakes or robots or whatever. And it's always good to learn new things.
I had I guess kind of a question / advice. When we're starting our portfolios or like projects that we're going to do you have any I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around what is a good project and not being like, hey, I want to do this and be like, that is way beyond and it's not going to be worth it. Is it better to do a simple one to just get something on the portfolio and then keep building up and so that way when we get to that point where we can actually start creating projects, I'm not just blanking and I want to start planning now for the future, I guess.
Excellent question. And I'll give you the same advice that I gave the previous class, is that it's way better for you to have a portfolio filled with projects that you care about. It doesn't matter if it's a big project that's going to take you a year to work on or a bunch of small projects that you can finish in a week or a month, right? The portfolio is supposed to be a reflection of the things that make you interesting as a person or that make someone want to take you on and hire you. So anecdotally, I was when I was starting my previous company, Moonrise, we were hiring a front-end web developer. And so I had a whole bunch of resumes from a bunch of very talented front-end people. They were more designer-focused developers. All of them had really crisp, smart-looking websites. On paper, they all had very similar backgrounds and experiences. But the person that I hired had a portfolio that was filled with fish because he's like a fisherman, and it was hilarious, right? He made him stand out to me as the hiring manager. I'm like, this guy gets it. Maybe I can find it. He probably even still has that same, let's see, maybe it's still got fish on it. I don't even know if he has a... okay, he just forwarded it to his digital agency, apparently, because he started a new company. But it was a hilarious portfolio, and it still had all the same stuff. It's like, here's the 10 projects I've worked on. Here's, he was a more senior person, so he had a little bit more history to show off. But it showed his personality, and it showed his character. All of the projects that we work on in this class specifically over the next 12 weeks, aside from the ones that are specifically designed to have you work on something to show a specific function or a specific result, when we start doing projects, I'm going to expect you or hope that you pick things that you care about. So start thinking about, what are my hobbies? Yours is, you mentioned a bunch of times you care about meats. So maybe you make a smoking tracker app where you can be like, I smoked brisket for 14 hours at this temperature, and it came out 4 out of 5 stars. And then I smoked it again for 17 hours at a little bit higher with this type of wood, and it came out at 5 out of 5 stars. So those are the types of apps where it's kind of simple to build, but it shows off your personality and it shows who you are as a developer. So I would encourage you to start thinking, for everyone in this room, start thinking of things that you enjoy. Last class, when everyone was off working on projects, I'm passionate about shooting rifles. So I built a range tracking app, so I could just, with this ammunition and this gun at this distance, with this wind speed, I was hitting here. So work on stuff you want to work on so that it's not boring. And I would encourage the same thing when, you're going to have less options as junior software engineers, but as you get a little bit further on your career, I pick jobs I want to work at based on what they're doing. And now I'm at the point where I just start my own company for that exact same reason. If I'm going to spend 8+ hours a day doing something, I want it to be something interesting that I care about, which is why I don't work at Google, because I don't care about search engines or AdSense or whatever it is they make their money off of. It just doesn't interest me. But for some people, I might work there for the free food, because that sounds pretty good. That's a sweet perk. Eric, go ahead.
All right, that's good advice. I guess I have my own little sort of portfolio already, just from what I've been working on over the years, and I was thinking I could bring, especially some of my stuff from from Python, I could just bring it to web, just like translate it onto something that work on the internet, and then make like 3 or 4 big portfolio projects. I also just had a quick question about advice. So I was looking at a lot of the jobs, and it's not like anybody had hired me anyway, but if I could actually
Not
get
that
hired.
attitude.
Yeah, well, not at this skill level anyway. Um, but if somebody would actually hire me and I had a choice between like in person or remote, so me personally, I'm leaning towards in person because I want the structure, and I want the networking opportunities, and I want to be able to take part in the culture. But a lot of people are very strongly like pro remote work, and they're very strongly like, it's the best thing ever. And then I remember I was at an Augusta Tech function, and my old boss at Rural Sourcing actually came by and said that Rural Sourcing is just all remote now, and they're actually thinking about letting people like do a good portion of their time just fully remote. And he says that the productivity actually increased with remote. So I guess the business side is one thing, but as a worker, some people were expressing a concern that if we move towards this like all remote everything, then we'll lose a number of advantages, mainly with the fact that jobs in Augusta can now be competed for by the entire country, and that say a job in San Francisco where there's like a COL adjustment in the salary, well, then the San Fran company can just give that job to someone in North Dakota. And then, the COL over there would be much lower than San Francisco. So there's less take home. So I guess my question is this big push for remote work ultimately going to be better for the workers?
I think that remains to be seen. This is kind of a new experiment. Software engineering has always been one of the few industries that is easy to do remotely. And so we kind of were ahead of the curve before the pandemic happened. I think what we're seeing, and this is just speculation, is that some people thrive in remote environments. Like for me, I will never work in an office again unless you pay me $1 billion, because I value my free time. I love the idea that I can just go take a nap in the middle of the day, no big deal, because I'm still getting my work done. Can't do. I love that I work at my work uniform is a t-shirt and shorts year round. Some companies like everyone to be in person, and there are very tangible benefits for working in person. You can communicate more clearly. It's a more controlled environment. Like some people, I rent an office in town specifically to get away from my family, so that I can have peace and quiet during the day. And I don't consider that remote because it's like, this is my place and I got a couch and a fridge and it is what it is. Will it be beneficial? I don't know. Will it help or hurt our wages overall? I don't know, because the opposite is also true, right? Like companies in San Francisco are saying, we're paying $200,000 for entry-level talent because San Francisco is so expensive. I can pay $150,000 and get really good developers in Augusta, Georgia. And so you're able to make West Coast salary or some fraction of West Coast salary at places that are cheap. Rural sourcing, you mentioned, is a great example of this. Their entire business model is get really good world-class developers for middle America type pricing. That's their entire business model for the most part of why they started. So I think we'll see a lot of people in places like this. I moved to Augusta from Chicago, where my previous company was located, because I wanted to have a farm, and I wanted to be a place that was warmer. And if we're going to be remote anyway, I might as well live where I'm happy. So I think you're going to see pros and cons from both directions. If you want to work in a place where you're working with other people, there are still going to be those opportunities available. It's just up to you. I think the beauty to a remote for me is that if I don't like my current job, or if I was trying to find a job, I can apply for any job anywhere in the country, and I don't have to move. I'm no longer tied to where I'm at. Augusta, one of the reasons we started the Code Bootcamp 4 years ago, used to not have that many development companies or that many development jobs. So there was like TaxSlayer, RSI, the Augusta Chronicle, and then Fort Gordon. Those are like the 4 big employers of engineers. Well, now we got a lot more, and it's getting better and better every day. But more importantly, if we continue to train and build excellent software engineers and keep them in this community, we've got people in Augusta working at Red Hat making Linux. We got people in Augusta. My company is based out of technically San Francisco, but my CEO lives in Chicago. So you can do excellent things regardless of where you're at when you're able to work remotely. So to me, the pros outweigh the cons, but that's on a case-by-case basis. So people like being in person. I would be happy if I didn't have to see anybody all week. I think there's too many meetings as it is. Except for you guys. You guys are great. Good question. What else? Nothing? All right. It is 7:21. I'm going to release tomorrow's homework today in like 10 minutes. I'm going to upload the video, and tomorrow things get spicy. We're going to start learning HTML. Tomorrow is also a special day. Every Thursday we have a guest speaker. So the guest speaker comes in at 3:30. So we have to all be in the call at 3:30 instead of 4. It does have a different link than the ones that we have for these classes. So make sure you go into your calendar and click on the Google Hangout for the Thursday day. That's 3:30. Tomorrow's speaker is the graduate that I've been talking about who had a job immediately after graduation from boot camp. So ask her as many questions you want. We have like an hour with her. And then we're going to start learning HTML. And then we're off like a rocket ship.